Paul Hood, Damian Christensen.
Andrew Betz.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, I went to the college because I wanted to play footy for St Joey's from when I was about 7 or 8, I reckon. I just thought that it was a really strong powerhouse footy club, and when you're young, footy motivates you a lot more than school. So yeah, I got to the college and was pretty keen to get up here as soon as I could. Yeah, there's the chicken ranch, and I think when we started, there was 3 milk bars on the walk too, but due to a lot of people that Chris has probably chased since, there was no milk bars by the time we finished. Yeah. Well, there was a little bit, yeah, but it was a time where if you didn't get drafted immediately, you'd maybe go in the VFL, but not a lot of people got taken out of the VFL then, and probably to put it in a perspective too, the draft age was, I think, 17 and a half. So a lot of guys that were the best cohort had sort of been drafted the year before, so I had a fair feeling that we're going to miss out. But to be back around family and community at St Joey's at that time was really important to me. So I was really grateful to be able to come back to such a great club and have great role models around to help me out for the next 30 years. Yeah, in the mornings, yeah, 5'9", and yeah, occasionally I'll go down forward, but pretty much that's just maybe an inside midfielder for the whole time. Yeah. I did at that time a little bit because a bloke called Kudafides was running nuts in the AFL around 1995. I think I was talking about him being the prototype, and you look at guys like the Bont and Cripps, he probably was, but I think it's been proven that good players still play pretty well, and just at the time I probably wasn't quite as good as I needed to be.
Yeah, it was, mate. Look, there's a little bit of truth to that, though, and set the record straight. I think I captained Victoria the year before coming in, but little known fact that we'll just sort of keep in the back pocket there. But yeah, I'd had a later start to football, and under 13s we were fortunate to have a guy called John Scarlett who had pretty good credentials coaching us in the under 13s. And John and the relationship with Matty too just created a lot of energy and fun around underage football, and I think we had 3 or 4 under 13 teams that played out at Noble Street on the small grounds. It was just like 2020 cricket. It was a lot of fun coming through the system. So great way to meet people and get involved in the club system, and never look back from under 13s really. Yeah, I mean, one thing about St Joey's is I think we're all blessed with pretty good, strong junior system and coaches, and most of us get success coming through, and really started under 15s with Alan Fowler, and Hoodie was a part of that team. And then bottom age under 18s, as you pointed out, moving in with Philly Smith, who had a fantastic group of people around him with Greggy Bryant and Ronnie Sutherland that were looking after us as young guys. So we were able to taste the ultimate success, and then 2 years later, Johnny Fitzgerald, top age under 18s, got us to another premiership. So we're very fortunate that a period of 5 years you're playing in 3 grand finals and think success just comes pretty easy, and you enter the senior system. And we're privileged to move in and work with Christo in 96 when we were juniors coming through. We got an opportunity, and that led to 97.
The word was that St Joey's were meeting with Amos to amalgamate. Not many people knew that, but St Joey's had no money, and they were strongly considering joining Amateurs. For both clubs then to Amateurs to amalgamate, and Radders rang me up. I'd just finished at Williamstown. I'd had a 1 year there. I did a mate a favour who was a president, and they were completely broke, and it was an interesting year in itself. So I stepped out of football per se, and I really had no intention of coaching. Dal Radcliffe rang me and said, St Joey's is in a bit of trouble. They're looking for someone to coach or to get involved. I came to a meeting at the club just to listen with no intent of doing anything. And I couldn't believe the discussion, and I ended up walking out as the coach. There was no formal interview per se with anybody, and certainly took unders to coach, and that's how I got involved with Joey's. Yeah, I had to go home and declare to my wife that I was now coaching Joey's, which, yeah, it was interesting. But, I mean, because my life, I coached Lara, then Camperdown, which was a big journey for a year, where we played off in a grand final. Then I went, because I was working in Melbourne, I couldn't sustain the Camperdown thing, and then I wasn't doing it. And then I ended up at Williamstown just to keep that club alive, which we did. And then found myself here just to help the club out. I did it for about 5k.
How much did you tell the better half you were doing it for?
I did a lot of overtime. Yeah. We 27 players that played senior footy the year before had left. You know, including people like Betz and Hungerford and others. I think Hunger's took the trip around Australia, and there was 27 senior players left the club. So it was go back to scratch, and it wasn't the fact that I had to play these guys. These guys were certainly good enough and ready. They just didn't have the senior games under their belt to win games. And even Brad Furman had left and others. And in the second year, we only won the 5 games in the first year, but I think it was about stabilisation, get games in, teach them senior footy. Next year I was able to bring Hungers back and Furter back and a couple of senior guys. And I think that what Betsy's talking about before, that learning how to win was already established at this club in junior footy. So learning how to win is half the battle. And I think once we started to win, then we got on a bit of a roll.
Yeah, for me personally, it was huge. So you've got a guy that's played in a midfield, you know, at the absolute highest level, and you're trying to do the same thing, and you watch how hard he worked and how hard he ran. And I think that just made him a great role model from the start for the rest of us in the team to see the work rate you need to be a really consistent footballer. But that's just on the field. Off the field, Chris O was like an uncle to everyone. Big brother, you probably reckon. Yeah, an uncle to everyone in the. He's so approachable, and you could ask him about anything. And I know there's plenty of times where he drove me home to Leopold after training because I was looking for a lift or whatever. It was out of his way, but it didn't matter. So then you go out and you play for someone like that in the weekend, and you want to make sure you do all you can to do the right thing by them, because they've put in so much sort of from a relationship point of view. So yeah, we were blessed to have him, and particularly for Betsy and I when we're so young. It's a great way to start.
Yeah, I guess like your first boss, isn't there? There's always just a huge amount of respect for someone that gives you an opportunity in life. And for the football part of it, that was 96 for us. We were able to play the 8 games. And I think one thing that struck me was really coming into the training system too. Some of the standards that Christo was upholding was a big step up for us coming out of the underage groups. And it was pretty black and white in what you could and couldn't do. And, you know, good firm values and rules that were starting to seep into the club that held us in good stead to go on and have some success later.
I learnt at Lara a few things about North Shore. I mean, I grew up and played North Shore Little League. I knew the system out there pretty well, and I knew how committed all the North Shore players were to that club. I mean, I had to get a clearance to Lara for under 14s, and my brother had to get clearance from North Shore, which they took to appeal. Like, you couldn't leave the club. So I learnt the trick with North Shore was you had to pull them apart player by player. At Lara, I remember I put every player's name up on the board and asked who wanted to play on who. Didn't pick best position. I said, who wants to play on who? And my memory of the first time I beat North Shore from Lara was that catapulted us towards 3 consecutive grand finals. Beating them here, I don't know if they underestimated our team and were just looking ahead. Certainly we built some momentum, so we'd already had that. If you go earlier in the year, I think we were 3 losses, 2 wins. I'd played reserves the week before here, saying to Radders, I'm just going to get myself half ready to play, and the following week we went to St Albans, and I come off the bench when we were 4 or 5 goals down, and it wasn't that I was getting kicks. I kicked a couple of goals because I was fresh, but it was the fact I could run next to Hoodie and yell, and run next to Betty and yell, pick him up, run there, give instructions on the field. So my playing days at that point, I could get a kick, but it was more about on-field coaching and just direction. And I think we got to the point where we started to believe in each other, and beating North Shore was more about momentum and that belief at the end of the year. And it nearly carried us right through to the finish line. I think if you look at the grand final, we were 63 points down at half time. We lost that belief, and then in the third quarter you can just sense it coming back. I think that was the same sense in that last home and away game. The difference between the grand final and the last home and away game is North Shore underestimated us in the home and away game, and I think they underestimated us in the final game.
I'd love to see some video of it. It's been a while, but
Black and white.
remember that feeling of coming in front. So you mentioned the margin. We're in front at 3/4 time, I think by 1 point. And Chris was excited, but trying to settle us all down, and it must have been a pretty tough job because the lid was off, I think, and we probably paid for it at 3/4 time. I know that was probably the end of it, but pretty amazing feeling.
Well, for me, I can remember half time and the sense that the heads were down. We were in the old rooms at West, and I went in, and I remember going into the showers and taking Hilly, Pods, Furter, myself, and I think Dean Smith. Might have been Dean, I'm not sure, but it was the old group, and we basically for the first 10 minutes just kicked the kids out of the middle, right? Because we were going to go down kicking and screaming. I remember saying to Furter, just jump into them, and we will just try and get this game, back in the balance. And we kicked a couple of real early goals in that third quarter, and it was about the third goal, then Ricky O'Toole and Hoodie and the next wave came back on ball with a bit of a sprint, because we were 63 down, we pegged it back to 49 or something, 48, and then we kicked another 3. And I think North Shore started to look at each other and think, what have we got here? And just the momentum. It was 11 goals in the third quarter. Yeah. And I don't know if you can remember that.
Well, you also had 10,000 people at the ground. I think a lot of people forget about the atmosphere created at West Oval, and to pack that amount of people, the energy, when you get a little bit of momentum, just carry the older brigade at the start. And then you're quite right, we can vividly still remember Torrin Baker running into open goals, and the younger brigade then took over with some raw energy, and that ultimately cut that margin down going into 3/4 time.
I reckon that was my last ever game of footy, by the way, and I had to take Andy and Flams before the game just to get into the game. And I had a massive blister on the ball on my foot, and the trainer popped it, like, for God's sake, you don't pop it at 3/4 time. But I remember with the players, the crowd that came out at 3/4 time was incredible. And Frank Foppiani said to me the year before, North Shore beat us by 100 at North Shore. And he said, what are you coaching that mob for? Like, they're going nowhere at North Shore, at Windsor Park. I remember in the grand final walking towards 3/4 time and walking past Foppy and saying, I've got a memory, mate, what you said last year. What am I coaching that mob for? They're going nowhere. And he looked at me, and I thought they were worried. And I looked across at the North Shore huddle, and they didn't have a big crowd. Our crowd was roaring. And I said to Radders, our players had just kicked 11 1/4, and on a pretty warm day. There wasn't much left in the tank. So I'm going to talk to the crowd. I'm going to actually not talk to the players. I'll talk to the crowd to get them roaring, to get that sense of that buzz, that first, adrenaline going back in the group. And when we broke up, I looked across at North Shore, and they were all looking at us, thinking, what the hell's going on over there? And we kicked the first 3 shots. We had the first 3 shots at goal in the last quarter. I think we hit the post twice and missed the third, and then they ran down and McGowan kicked a goal, I think, just to get them that bit in front.
And Darren Walsh, recruited up from Bendigo, was an absolute star of the GFL. I think he sunk 2 from outside 50. And I just remember at that moment seeing goals like that going through, thinking, oh, okay, this is...
Well, he kicked 5 in the second.
Yeah.
Yeah, he kicked 5 in the second to give him that lead. He was a freak.
So it took some extraordinary efforts, didn't it, really, probably to nip us in the bud a little bit on that hot day and sap us in the last quarter. And what did it end up being? 31 points?
No, we kicked, I think, 21 goals and lost, and I think it was around 20.
Yeah, I remember there being 46 goals for the game in the grand final on an amazing day. Family members talking about it later on, but it had it all, like those goals from outside 50. There was a massive fight in there somewhere, which we haven't talked about yet. I clearly remember watching the fight from a long way out, didn't get in it. I think that might have been in the second quarter, and that rattled a few of us young blokes too, obviously, grand finals and the North Shore guys having reputations, but I think we found out that they were human just like us in that third quarter, and it's a shame we didn't get there, but it was an amazing day.
Is that right?
No, I played in all of them.
All of them.
I remember them clearly well, but I think the thing that a lot of people don't reflect on is the 4 grand finals with, I think, 4 different coaches. And for a time there, it was a blessing but a curse that we had such wonderful coaches, because they were sought after everywhere else, and they were really good in their professional life, so they moved for work a bit too. But it was like we had a mini rebuild each time. So those grand finals might have been close together, but I feel like we had 7 or 8 guys playing in their first grand final every time we were in one. And things might have been different if we had a bit of continuity like we've seen in Jamo's era. Things might have changed, but I think if you're Breakfast and Joey's back then, you had a lot more good Saturday nights than bad ones.
Is 06 the one that stings the most, that you lead by 16 points at 3/4 time?
Yeah, for sure. And going in, having won the second semi, I think that was the only time we won the second semi, going into any of those grand finals, and won it pretty significantly. And disappointing not to win. A phenomenal performance from South Barwon to get up from 16 points down, and probably a bit of their experience in the end, and had a little breeze behind them in that last quarter, and not much we did went right. But yeah, that one does sting, but sometimes, just it's not your day, and the opposition are a bit too good.
Yeah, I might go back to the older school. I think, they were pretty impressionable guys when we first started coming through in 96, 97, but Brad Furman stands out for me, and just being able to sit down in the back line and watch him hit it down to Hoodie and Christo. And just the presence he commanded on the ground and his ability to win the ball to advantage, I just thought was exceptional. Complemented by Dean Smith too. I think Dean was a VCFL captain. Dean could single-handedly turn a game of 10 goals at half-time and get you back into the game from centre-half back. So his impact on a game and ability to change the course of things, I hadn't seen anything like that. Brett Hungerford, just for his sheer strength, and ability to be a brick wall and dominate one-on-ones, I thought was just incredible. And then through that era, we had really great small players as well. So being able to watch Hoodie do his craft over a long period of time was amazing for his consistency. And Ricky O'Toole, I always had a soft spot for Ricky. I think coming from Bannockburn and he being almost a neighbouring Corio. Ricky would bring the travelling roadshow every week. Russ had set up his little pop-up toaster van in Doc's pocket over there, and you'd have half of Corio piling in to watch Ricky kick goals out of a forward pocket. I think he kicked 7 or 9 on debut, and from that moment, watching him from behind the fence and then playing with him, I just loved what he was about. So from the older school players, they were the ones that struck me most.
It's a pretty amazing player, Ricky. It was phenomenal to play with him and to play right alongside him and to sort of share those games with him. But Brad Furman was amazing for the two of us, and Chris I would remember this too. But Ferda was that good in the ruck that not only would he tell you what blade of grass to stand on, he'd remember whose turn it was to actually row it. So I'd go further over here and say, nah mate, you had the last one, this is Ricky's turn. Rick, go over there, and then Rick would ask for the next one and say, nah mate, you've had your go, put his turn, and he'd keep counting his own head. He was that good about who could stand where and when it was their turn. But phenomenal player. It was great to play with him when he was so young.
I brought Greavesy home with Rusty for dinner one night, and we just sat and, I don't think football was his thing back then. It's amazing that he's at an AFL club now, because football to him was something he just did. and he didn't realise, you know, that he had the potential. He had the body. He didn't grow into his body, and he didn't find the hunger in footy until, you know, I don't think the second year that I was here. And the big buckets, he broke his thumb in that grand final. So he had a broken thumb, which really, I don't know which game in the finals he did, but for a bloke that could clunk the ball, and that was his asset, and he was a reasonably good kick, having a broken thumb, and you know, that certainly hurt our, you know, what he said before, you need luck to win grand finals. Well, things like that just go against you. But I thought he had a great career from where he started from to where he finished, and his passion for football is clear. You know, he's been able to work his way to the top level. Trust me, the Ballarat Footy Club, North Ballarat, fairly strong, and even when they went into the VFL, they were fairly strong. I mean, they won flags, and Fitzgerald, I think, was coaching back then, Gerald Fitzgerald, and there was a great lure to find out who was coming to Ballarat from Geelong or wherever else to do study, and they would certainly know before you even landed that you were coming. And to try and get kids back, again, for a club that was playing not much money, it was a big ask. And I think, you know, Woody wouldn't have come back for a great deal of money, but potentially the pull of the club and the mates and the level of this competition also helps.
Well, it was really sad. Yeah, there's no getting away from it. It was a really disappointing time, and I didn't play here again after that. I just found it really difficult to then be motivated to come back, and fortunately I started a coaching career at the same time. But it was a bit confusing as to why it happened, but the club went in a different way, and the success since says that decisions, you know, it's hard to say that they were bad decisions, but Aaron went on and then coached at Leopold, had success there, and he's had a great coaching career, so he did really well to get the best out of it. But yeah, it happened really quickly, really sudden. I do remember that we lost our last 4 games that season. We were playing for first in round 17, or whatever the fourth last round was, against Colac. They kicked some late goals and got over the line and beat us, and then we were playing for second the next week, lost, then third and lost, and then playing for a spot in the 5, and we got pipped by Johnny Fitzgerald's Bell Park at the end. So yeah, it happened really quickly. It wasn't something we saw coming, and for a few of us it was hard to take, but that happens in footy clubs. You know, you have different regimes in charge at times, and they've got different priorities, and you can't really say that the footy club's made too many mistakes in the last 30 years, but yeah, maybe that was one.
Mate, quick one. What about how it started? Have you captured that though? With Greavesy? How his coaching career started here at St Joey's?
Has been spoken about, yeah.
Good, okay. You don't need to go there.
Well, you can if you like, you can touch on it if you like.
Well, I just think Mark the Man was sort of 2005, wasn't it, when Mark Neild was appointed head coach of the club, and Neildy, I think, was with us for a whole 4 weeks, or he may have coached even the year before, but he'd certainly recruited myself and another 4 or 5 to come back and re-energise the team and get after a flag. And I think he moved to Western Jets sort of 4 weeks after we'd commenced our pre-season, and we were coachless going into the 2005 season. So, you know, big credit to Greavesy, who put his hand up there and said, hey, actually, I'm going to go on this journey of coaching and grab this group. And 2005 we played out, made a prelim final, and were knocked off by Newtown. And then the following year was 2006 against South Barland, where I think we lost 1 game for the season. So just enormous program that he was able to put together to deliver success over those 2 years that he did coach.
And a lot of people probably don't remember now, but at the start of 2005, we were like 1-5 or something. And I remember sitting with Aaron and watching the girls play netball midweek, and he was under a lot of pressure. He'd been told that if things didn't turn around soon, it was going to be his one and only year as coach. So from there on in, I think he only lost another half a dozen games in the next 3 seasons, I think it was. So it's a pretty amazing effort. Yeah, it certainly wasn't all pure skills in the start.
It's a thankless job, coaching.
So, on the Braves,
Yeah, well, it caught me by surprise somewhat. You know, like I thought the club was on the right path, and that, you know, just particularly stepping out of the grand final. I think the under-18s might have won the flag that year as well, and we had a reasonably strong reserve. So the club was in a reasonable state, and I went to a meeting thinking I was signing up again for the next year, walked out not coaching, and I went, I'm not 100% sure what happened there, but potentially, you know, they had marked somebody else for the role. You know, strange things happen, you know. I still, to this day, don't know why or how they didn't think I was the right person for the job. Oh, look, I do, and I mean, I got sacked from Lara, and I'd taken Lara from 11 goals down at quarter time in my first game against Newtown to 2 grand finals, and we should have won both. So my brother got glandular fever, and you know, Renee Peters got injured, and someone else was injured. I mean, it's luck. We had the best side by a mile, and like Greavesy, you learn from your first job. You go away and took Camperdown from bottom to top. We lost a grand final because I lost Robbie Mifsud in a second semi, who was by far the best centre forward in that competition. And then tapped out of footy because I didn't want to play anymore. End up here by default. 2 years, grand final, tapped out. I go, here we go again, like this. I didn't get picked for the Falcons job. Ken Sheldon got the job, but he got, like Greavesy, I think I was, you know, what's his name, the Bradbury, and Ken Sheldon ends up coaching in Adelaide. Mick Turner rings me up just prior to the season. I end up coaching and getting told this is not going to be much of a year. We won't get players drafted out of this year, you know, and lo and behold, we win a flag. So after a decade, you learn the craft of coaching a little bit, and for me, you've got to have thick skin.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Just thinking about, we've talked about this 97 grand final. There's no netball team back then. There's certainly no girls and women's football, and how much it's changed. And that's something I'm really proud of, that our footy club has grown so much and become so inclusive. But yeah, I remember convincing Kirst to come down and play netball. It was in the second year of netball. She missed the first one. And she's been here uninterrupted for about 27 years since. It's a pretty amazing effort. And then for my own girls, I went away at a time when they were playing their juniors, and it was actually just club members, other ladies helping out with the netball, that would look after them during the day while Kirst could play a netball, and she'd be off at Ricky Lee's house over the road or something, looking after the kids. And just phenomenal that a local footy club can do that for you, in such a great community. And I'm really fortunate that I get a chance to come back and do a little bit here now. But yeah, it's been a huge influence for a long time. It probably got me a job too at the school, which not a lot of people know, but Greg Bryant, as the president, happened to have a wife who was strategically placed as the principal secretary at the time. And when I rang Ben Ingleton to say that I couldn't get a teaching job in Geelong, I have to play footy in Bendigo, I got a phone call from Peter Cannon the next day. So yeah, I'm pretty grateful, pretty loyal, and been really blessed. No, that's one thing that probably the club could have helped a bit more with. But, not so much. We're all out there looking for that tooth till about 6:30 that night, but it was the reverse raffle the next day, and a lot of clubs would have made sure I win, but just too many honest people here at Joey, so I didn't get the money to pay for the tooth.
Yeah, look, I mean, Dad always just took a sort of backseat role. He was always there, but he was never up the front coaching or team managing, and his preference was always to be behind the scenes and doing roles like being on the interchange and things like that. But I think the meals, I'm hearing varying stories on how that started, but my recollection was Thursday night meals, a lot of the university guys from Ballarat were going down to Macca's because they were just too expensive. I think it was $15 for a parma back at the time. We'd race off and go and get some Happy Meals and get a fill down at McDonald's, and then come back to the teams and drive back to Ballarat. Well, as soon as that story filtered into Dad at home, he said, I'm not having any of this. He said, if the meals are too expensive, we'll come back down and we'll get you some $5 bolognese bowls on the table, and you have no excuse. You've got to stay and support your club. So my recollection of their involvement starting with the meals was around trying to keep people here. and make it accessible for all. And I think that then went on for sort of 10 years, and that stench of bolognese coming out of the kitchen from Wednesday through Thursday was a bit of a staple for 20 weeks through the year. But they loved it, and I think, you know, it wasn't just about their involvement with the meals, it was the community of people that we had through the club over a sort of 10-15 year period, where our parents are all socially engaged through us playing sport. It was just immense, and those relationships have continued sort of 30 years on. So yeah, it's been an amazing impact on him and the broader family being involved in the St Joey's community. Yeah, I mean, absolutely, immensely proud of the whole family. They've all been involved at varying capacities, but I think that was just sheer determination and hard work back then. It was before the trend of embracing female sport into the football system was there. So there was a lot of work, I guess, in the initial stages in setting all that up. And just the other day I was out at Bannockburn, she asked to go and get all her meeting minutes converted off a floppy disk onto a DVD, so she could go through them, went and did it, and just to see the sheer volume of work and the initial years that they'd set up to do was amazing. So yeah, incredibly proud, and hopefully that benefits, you know, future generations and broadens and diversifies this club, and it just gets bigger and bigger as a result of that. Yeah, I mean, Bruno, just such an immense figure, but one thing, and more on the serious side, that struck me over the period that he passed was just the stories coming about of all the roles that he had done at the club. So I think he'd worked his way through every administrative post, he played seniors, reserves, he coached football, and then when we found him through that late 90s into 2000s, he was just running around handing out chewing gum. And so I think a lot of the boys actually thought, hang on, this guy he's up for a laugh, and he's having a beer out the back and a cigarette with everyone and telling stories. But when you actually peeled off the layers of 50 years involvement in the club, it was just incredible how much he'd done and the impact he'd had. And then I don't think we fully appreciated that for the decade or 5 years that a lot of us were around. So on his passing, it's a shame that all those stories sort of come out in the fullness of time there. But you know, just the impact he's had on the club at every level is quite incredible, and that continues on through, you know, through Wendy, Todd, Darren, and the grandkids. So yeah, enormous family. It's great to see the bar behind us named after him. I think that's apt, isn't it? That's what Bruno would have loved to have as his defining moment at the end of it all.
It felt like, for me with Bruno, there was nothing he couldn't get you on match day. He was a bit like Morgan Freeman's character in Shawshank Redemption. You'd go up to him and open your footy bag and realise your socks were still in your boots from last week, and he'd find you a new pair, or you're playing away and you pack black shorts and not white ones, and there they were. But with Bruno, you get whatever you want during the day. He'd do anything for the players, and then at night time, you'd get a free lesson from him and Andre. And the later the night got, probably the better the lessons were. But you know, every Saturday night they were just they were must-watch TV to be around them later on in the night.
Probably plenty. I've got plenty of advice over the fence. Well, look, footy clubs survive and on volunteerism and characters of people. And I spent a lot of time in the GFL, even in my formative years before I was playing seniors. You know, you'd watch Joey's who played Lara juniors. You know, Lara and Joey's were both in second division back then, and both worked their way up. But every good club in this competition or any competition has good or strong committee presence and really good volunteer presence. And you know, that group of people, that era of people who, you know, my parents were the same, who grew up in an era where people volunteered and were committed. You know, this group now is starting to learn that and invest in time. Like, you invest so much in your playing days. People talk about the good players, but it's not just the good players that make a club, it's the good people. And it takes a whole club, not 22 people, to make it through that last day.
Yeah, all of it. You know, so much of what I learned came from here. A little bit through the football. I had some wonderful coaches and was able to borrow a little bit from each of those and see what they did well, and maybe try and work on a few things maybe that I thought they didn't do perfectly as well. But mostly it was the people. And for me, from the years of 18 to 22, I was pretty mixed up. Like the social side of footy much more than probably playing the game. But it was the people here that looked after me and you were always cared for, and then just amazing values were on display through the families that you've spoken about, and throw the Bryants and the Maddens in as well, and Jackmans and plenty of others. It's a long list, but the senior footballers I played with too, just great men, and you didn't have to look too far to find someone to model yourself on.
Yeah, absolutely, King, and I was quite happy to make the cut and be involved in that. I think there was a lineup of about 50 senior footballers and they selected 10 of us, so I've never got to the bottom of what the criteria was, but I certainly participated in that. And so Blue Heelers were looking to have a footy section segment within the show, and it was to be filmed 2 teams competing down at Werribee, and the call out went to see if they could get 10 players per side to recreate a football scenario where one of the opposition players was knocked out and there was a fracas on the oval, and that caused an enormous amount of bad blood between the 2 teams. So St Joey's as a club were asked to submit 10 players, and there was no shortage of volunteers to do this, King. You'd be amazed at how many people were able to get off work in the middle of the day to go down and recreate this scene. So we completed that. I think Werribee VFL were the other team that were involved in it. And then the beauty of this though was afterwards there was a second scene, and that was to move down to South Melbourne and be involved with Lisa McCune and John Wood in a setting in the all too familiar Blue Heelers pub. So they were looking for 5 players out of the first 10 to put their hands up and go down and be involved in a pub scene. Again, was fortunate enough to make the cut there. Don't know what the criteria was, but we went down there and we sat within the pub. Ricky O'Toole, myself, strategically placed both of us were up beside John Wood, and they put 2 pots in front of us, and we thought, well, how good's this? We're in the middle of the week and we're able to have a drink on set with one of Australia's most famous actors, and they went cut, the scene started, we had a sip of our beer as instructed, and it was non-alcoholic beer. It was almost spat out all over the bar, and they had to say cut. Went to the second scene, and we're having a chat to John during the break, and we said, John, what's the go? We thought we were coming down here for a session at the bar. And he said, well, no, it's consistent that we never put alcohol in front of performers because, the obligation is to create a safe workplace. And Ricky and I looked at each other and said, well, we better keep it to 2 cuts, John. Let's get this done and get out of here. So, yeah, look, it was a bit of fun. I think the Geelong Addy picked it up, and, there was no end of ribbing that went on after that, mate. Be good to actually see if it's in the vaults of Channel 7, so I don't know if you've got any connections with Cam Ling and you can get him to go through the archives or something like that. It'd be good to see the final cut.
Still waiting for a call back.
I am, mate. I think I gave John Wood a signature and that was the end of it.
Foxtel are doing reruns at the moment.